So hi everyone, and welcome to the Wandering Bike from Steinbeck Country to the City of Angels. My name is Gisela, and I'm a librarian with the Salinas Public Library, and I'll be hosting today's event. We'd like to give a special thank you to librarian Sean for presenting today and sharing his experience on the road. Now, as some of you may remember, Sean used to be an adult services librarian with the Salinas Public Library. Although he has moved on, he still continues to share his love of cycling with his community through bike-related programs like this one. Sean has been an avid cyclist for the last 15 years and can often be seen riding through the coast on 30-mile-plus bike rides. He is the proud owner of 3 bikes, his favorite, which is the Scott CR1 road bike, and has participated in many bike events, including the Sea Otter Classic. Recently, Sean has begun exploring long-distance cycling adventures, and this is the story of his first one. So I'm very excited to welcome Sean.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Briscoe, and I used to be a librarian at Salinas Public Library. And I just wanted to say thank you to Isela and Kathy and Salinas Public Library for letting me tell my story. As some of you who know me know, I love to talk about bikes. And thank you all for joining me on this little adventure. So let's get going. All right, so this adventure that we have is one of my life dreams I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to ride my bike from my front door to my parents' front door's house in Southern California. And, you know, between college and career, never got the opportunity. But in September, I was granted the opportunity of a week off, and I thought this is the time to do it. So I decided to leave my house in Monterey and head down the coast and experience California in a different way that you might not get as you drive down the coast in a car. So really why I did this was, well, it was there. Let's ride it. Let's see what happens. And so starting off, this adventure took quite a bit of planning. It probably took me about 6 months of planning, figuring out which roads were open, which roads were safe to ride on, where am I going to sleep, what am I going to carry. So a lot of minute details went into this, and also including what happens if my bike breaks down, what happens if I get to a road that I thought was open and it was closed. So like I said, it took about 6 months of planning, but as you can see, this is the route that I ultimately decided on. The original plan was to ride down the coast through Big Sur, but unfortunately due to COVID, all the state parks were closed down. So had to adjust my plan, and so I decided to take a train from Salinas to San Luis Obispo, and decided to just stay in hotels the whole way down. And so from there, I took a train, which was kind of neat, since I've never taken a long train ride, and then got on my bike in San Luis Obispo and headed down. And to put it in perspective of what it would look like if I did this bike ride on the East Coast, it would be equivalent of starting at the top of Massachusetts, riding across the entire state, through the state of Connecticut, touching in New York, and ultimately ending up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And the neat thing is to see this is on the West Coast, I only rode maybe 1/3 of California, but to see it on perspective on the East Coast, it was kind of neat to see how much you actually can cover on a bicycle. One of the other challenging things that I faced was, how do you set this up? How do you carry so much on your bike, and what kind of bike setup do you need? So, and a little background about myself is not only am I a librarian, but on the weekends and as a little side job is I'm a bike mechanic. So understanding how a bike works, how a bike is fit, where to place things for the proper balance, and ultimately not being able to lose control on a bike was one of the aspects that I wanted to look. So I kind of started grabbing all my little bike bags and putting them on my bike and trying to figure out what makes the most sense. Do I have too many bags? Do I not have enough bags? Where should I put things? So you can see on the screen, this is the first bike setup that I did. And this is more of your traditional bike setup, bike packing setup, where if you were doing a lot of off-road stuff, going through the forest, this is what you would normally do. And you can see on the right, I did a little test run. I did a little bike camping up to Sunset Beach in Watsonville. And this setup worked well, though ultimately it didn't make sense for my trip. I felt like my bike was lopsided a little bit. It was a little wobbly when I carried the stuff that I would carry for my actual trip. So what I did was I readjusted and put on some different bike bags. And you can see that looks a little different. There's not so many bags up on front. And this is ultimately what I ended up with. So you can see I have my pannier bags on the back, which would carry the bulk of my stuff, my 10 pounds of food, my clothing, any toiletries I would need. I ended up not using the big long saddle bag because I didn't need a sleeping bag. In this center part, my frame bag, I carried most of my bike tools, spare spokes, a spare chain, a couple wrenches, Allen wrenches, just anything of the basics that I would actually need to do anything on the bike to, if it did break down, but also enough to get me to the nearest bike shop. And then you can see up here, this was my little feed bag for the day. This is where I kept all my food, my 9 granola bars and my 4 PB&Js and, you know, a couple of bags of gummy bears. And then up front was this little green bag here. This was kind of like my personal bag. This was my wallet, my keys, my cell phone. So if I did stop at a grocery store, I knew the biggest, most important bag was to grab this bag. And then also I carried a couple extra water bottles, just in case there was some long stretches where water wasn't as frequent. So you can see on the right, this is what I look like right before I started my journey, all smiles and sunshine, ready to start this adventure. And so, you know, and the one thing that really caught my attention is the bike weighs about 20 pounds. And with everything on it, the bike weighed about 40 pounds. So it doubled the weight of my bike. And also one thing that I learned was my bike, I'm used to pedaling with 170 pounds of myself with the bike. Well, now I'm adding an extra 20 plus pounds to it. So that was one thing that I had to adjust to, because now I'm pedaling 200 plus pounds and not just 170 pounds. So one thing that always comes to mind is, how do you train for something like this? And, you know, I designed this structured training plan like I would do before any bike event. You know, I started out riding 20 miles, and then every week I increased by 10 miles. And then also, then I started carrying stuff on my bike to kind of get used to how the bike handled, how the bike moved, how it felt doing turns and going fast. And then one thing I also did to help myself was I drew a little circle around my house of 5 miles. Any errand I had to run within 5 miles, I had to ride my bike. So going to the grocery store, carrying a gallon of milk on the back of my bike with a loaf of bread tied to the top, running to Target, I did everything within that 5 miles on my bike, which was also neat because I love riding my bike everywhere, but also it gave me a sense of how certain things fit on the bike, but also how the bike fits. And so from there, that gave me some confidence in carrying this weight down the coast of California. So you can see in this little video that I had a lot of stuff on my bike. And one of the things was fitting it all in. It took some strategic planning. And luckily, you know, my experience as a backpacker taught me how to kind of pack minimally and pack it all in. So that was a lot of fun. It was kind of fun to also figure all this stuff out. And so once I got all that figured out, got my train ticket, the day came and it was time to go. So I started my day off, as I said prior, that my original plan didn't work. So I ended up taking the train. But for myself, it was actually pretty cool because I've never taken a long train ride. I don't think I've really ever taken a train ride. And you don't really travel much by train. So that was kind of neat. And it was kind of neat to go down Highway 101, which I've driven 100 times, but actually being able to see what's actually on the side of the road. and how beautiful going through the Salinas Valley is, and how beautiful it is to enter into San Luis Obispo from a completely different side that's not Highway 101. So I got to the Salinas train station, which was a treat in itself, because the Salinas train station, which is the third train station of Salinas, was built in 1942 by the Southern Pacific Railroad, and it is beautiful inside. It's got a beautiful mosaic or beautiful mural that describes the history of Salinas and the Salinas Valley, which was really neat. And so, which was neat, I had the whole train station to myself. And so I decided to sit outside and just kind of wait. I was a little nervous, but before this all happened, I had my first mishap already, and I was already nervous already. So I took my bike off of my car from a friend who drove me, and I set it down, and I heard this clunk, and I thought, that doesn't sound good. Well, my back tire fell off, and I'm thinking, oh no, I haven't even got on the bike yet. I just got to the train station. How is my trip already going to be ruined? Luckily, Salinas had a bike shop right next to the train station. So I ran over to Valley Bikes right there on Alisal and Salinas. Got there, was waiting there 10 minutes before they opened, and just begged and prayed that this wasn't a trip-ending malfunction. Luckily, they're really great. They fixed it right up, and I got back in time to jump on the train. So I jumped on the train, and Amtrak actually, and I encourage anyone, whoever does a trip, take the train. It is so much fun. They load your bike up in the back, and you pretty much get to sit and relax until you get to your destination. So I jumped on the train and headed down towards San Luis Obispo. So once I got to San Luis Obispo, this was kind of my first day of riding. It was real easy. I had 14 miles, and it was really just getting down to Pismo. Pismo was my real launching pad. But it was neat to ride down, go see Avila Beach, go down the coast. When I got to the San Luis Depot, I got off, changed my clothes, got ready for, just kind of got ready for this adventure. I will admit, I was very nervous, very nervous. It was neat to see the San Luis Obispo train station, which was built the year after Salinas was built. So they were very similar inside, which was neat. And so I left San Luis Obispo, and the first place I had to go to was the mission San Luis Obispo de Tolosa, which was built September 1st, 1772, by Father Unopero Serra. And being the love of history, love California history, being a California native, the fact that I was following kind of the trail that the De Ananza trail came up, and the trail that Father Unopero Serra came up, it was neat to I made a point to stop at as many missions as possible, because I was kind of following in their footsteps. And it sounds kind of dorky, but I felt like I was a little adventurer in my own life, following their footsteps. So I stopped by the San Luis Obispo mission, said a quick prayer for good weather, no traffic, just everything goes safe, no injuries, and which kind of helped get the nerves out of me. And so I left the mission, and I had to, one of the stops that my family always stops at is Dinosaur Park. And so I had to stop by there, take a little picture for my brother. And then I headed down to Pismo, where it was nice. It was kind of nice to get the little jitters out. And so I got to Pismo, had a nice meal, had some of their famous clam chowder, and kind of really mentally got ready for this trip. It was one of those, when I got to Pismo, it was one of those moments of, okay, I'm actually doing this. I'm actually going to do this. So that was kind of, it was actually happening kind of moment for me. So my next day, Pismo to Lompoc, was really my first real day of riding. I did 47 miles. I climbed about 1,900 feet, and took me about 4 hours. And it was kind of interesting because I started on the coast, very similar weather to here in Monterey, the cold mornings, the wet fog rolling in. And so you can see here, I'm all bundled up. I got my arm warmers on. I'm riding through the small little town of Guadalupe. But knowing that when I ended, I'm going to be inland, and just the weather change was something that I was going to have to prepare for also. So it was really neat to see these small little towns that you would drive right through, you blink an eye and they're gone. But when you ride on a bike through Highway 1 and through these streets, you get a sense of the type of community, you get a sense of the smells, the air, you get a sense of even the littlest hills that you run into. Not only are in a car, you zip right up them, no big deal. But when you get on a bike, those little hills start to add up, but you get a sense of how the geography changes. And so that was one thing really neat. And one nice thing about riding through these small towns is it felt just like home. It felt like riding through some of the back roads of Castroville and Salinas and up by Toro Park. So this is Highway 1, and this is leaving the city of Guadalupe. And it was neat because they had the ag business going. The streets were real small, but it was nice. The cars were really respectful and gave me plenty of space. But you got to smell the different smells, the lettuce. Even when the lettuce was spoiling, you got to smell that, and it really put you in the moment, which was really nice. Though this day had one big worry for me, and it was this road called Harrison Grade Road. And this is the road to cut over from Highway 1 over to Lompoc. And as you can see, it's a long climb. It's steep. And so I was a little nervous. Not only did I have all this extra weight, but also I couldn't call anyone for a ride. I had to get up this hill. And so I ended up making it up this hill. And you can see here, this is the top of Harris Grade. And you can see the roads here. There's not much shoulder here, and there's a steep drop off over here. So it was a little nerve wracking, but it was, and also going down this hill, I probably hit about 25 miles an hour on my bike, which having all that extra weight on your bike is kind of like driving a car and then driving a car with a trailer attached to it. It just moves differently. So taking the turns I had to be a little bit more conscious. I couldn't just barrel down them as fast as I could. But it was fun, and it was a nice view of the city of Lompoc, and so seeing that was quite interesting just to see. I mean, a lot of times we never get to see the aerial view of a city, but the highlight of this day for me was Mission La Purísima in the city of Lompoc, which this was interesting because, and this was kind of a bonus on my adventure, because the Mission La Purísima was founded by the Franciscan orders, just like Father Uno Gladysera, and this was founded in 1787, but it's not actually on the mission trail. It's one of those that really hardly ever gets mentioned. And also this is one of the missions that's actually owned by the state of California. It's an actual state park. And what's really neat is that the mission is alive. There's chickens running around, there's goats, there's pigs. So you kind of get a sense of, and they're in the corrals that were there when the mission was still active. So you kind of get a sense of what the mission actually looked like when it came down, or when it was active and running. So I finally made it to the city of Lompoc, and I was a little burnt out. And so I decided to roam around looking for a good burrito. That was kind of my go-to meal, a burrito and a soda after every ride. And so I ended up riding around, and I came across this mural, and the picture came out a little funky, but what this is Lompoc was founded as a temperance colony in the 19th century. And so you can see in this mural, the ladies with the axe are breaking the bottles, breaking the barrels. And I just thought the fact that it was still there, and it was something neat and I never knew that Lompoc was founded as a temperance colony. So I definitely enjoyed, and in Lompoc, they have a bunch of murals like this scattered throughout. So after Lompoc this was the day that really scared me. This was the day I was really training for. So I rode the 74 miles from Lompoc all the way to Carpinteria, which is just south of Santa Barbara. And this was also not only the most miles, but also the most elevational gain that I would be riding today or this trip. So I left Lompoc early in the morning. You can see a little foggy, but roads were nice. I was in high spirits, and I started the 17-mile climb up San Julian Hill, which was the hill that I was nervous about. I definitely had to keep my mind occupied, so I decided to film myself and sing some music, just knowing that I had a long day ahead of me. So also not only the challenging part of riding up this hill, it was going down the hill with the extra weight on the bike, but also I had this really nerve-wracking freeway interchange. And I wanted to show you guys what I meant is on the right is your bike lane. That's what I rode on. This lane right here goes south or goes north. This lane goes south. So I had to cross not only one lane, but get over in this lane while cars were driving. And, luckily the cars were really respectful. They let me get over but I was very, very nervous of this interchange right here. It all worked out well, but it was definitely something that was on my radar to keep an eye on. And this is a little view of what I actually went over. This is the San Julian Hill. And, it looks big, you go over it, but it's the 17 miles of constantly riding uphill that really kept me going. So it took a lot of playing mind games and just keep pedaling. And so when I got down here, I did a quick little pit stop at Gaviota State Park, picked up some water, and kind of just sat under the sun a little bit. I can definitely tell I was getting more towards Southern California. The temperature was starting to rise. So I decided to have lunch underneath a nice tree and just kind of chatted with the park rangers. And that was also one of the neat things about this trip is a lot of people kept coming up to me asking me if I was okay. What am I doing? And I told them that I chose to ride my bike down the coast for fun. And they just kind of looked at me like, why would you do that? You have a car. And I just said it was something I like to do. So that was kind of neat. The park ranger was really amused by the bike setup and why I was doing this. So then I decided, then I had to jump on Highway 101. It's the section where Highway 101 and Highway 1 merge. And this is how you get to Santa Barbara. And this part, it wasn't too scary, had nice wide bike lanes. But the hard part about this was the cars going zipping past you at 80 miles an hour. That just took a nervous toll on me personally, just because if I wandered off a little bit, they were going really fast. But it was really nice. I really had no issues with cars on this trip. It was really just a little nerve-wracking. And so, after I got down from Santa Barbara or get towards Santa Barbara, I did have a little mishap on along what in cycling terms is we call you bonked, which basically means you're losing all your calories, the sugar. And I noticed I was getting really, really tired and really weak. And I still had about 35 miles to go. So like I told my mom, oh, thank heaven for 7-Eleven. I ran in there, grabbed me a nice soda, grabbed me some candy, and I was back as new. So being in Santa Barbara, I had to stop at one of my favorite missions, which is Mission Santa Barbara, which was founded by Padre Fermin Leson in 1787. And this mission is just a gorgeous mission. It's just beautiful. It's still, still active, masses and stuff. And so had to do another stop there, say another quick prayer of just thank you for letting me get over that big hill, surviving 101, and also just to see it and just how beautiful it was. So after the mission, I finally got down to what I kind of called like the Southern California beach, the big beaches, the big bike lanes, something that reminded me of growing up and going down to Newport Beach. And the sun was out and it was warm, so it was nice. But after this, I ended up in Carpinteria. And after this day, there wasn't much going on after I got to the hotel. I found myself a nice big burrito, and I basically just crashed. I went to bed. I was wiped, but I knew the next day was going to be a nice day. This was my easy day, my rest day, my recovery day, kind of my halfway point. And this was from Carpinteria down to the city of Oxnard. And this day was 32 miles, only 435 feet of climbing, which is a fraction of what I did the day before. And the nice thing about this day was it was mainly bike paths, protected bike paths, boardwalks. And so I only had one tiny little section of Highway 101, which was really neat because, like I said, I love history. This section of Highway 101 is known as the Screaming Eagle Highway, which is named after the 101st Airborne Division, called the Screaming Eagles. And they started in 1942, and they became really famous for their actions during D-Day and throughout World War II. You can see a picture of them here right before Operation Overlord D-Day with General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, giving them a talk before they jumped into Normandy, France. So that was kind of neat to see that. And, this was my fourth day riding by myself. So, my mind was wandering and I was just thinking of what they did. And, it was definitely helped me get through the day. But so this is what the bike path actually looks like. You can see the freeways right here. This is Highway 101. And it was so nice to ride along Highway 101, knowing that I have a gate between me and the cars. And it was just a stunning, stunning view of the ocean. And it was nice to be able to ride without worrying about cars and actually being able to enjoy the scenery. And also, by this time, my legs and body were getting used to riding that it was now like clockwork. It was just get on your bike and keep on pedaling. So after I got through that beautiful bike path, I entered into the city of Ventura, which was another beach community along the coast. And I really like that they have these signs that you see a lot of them in Southern California, the Pacific Coast Bike Route, which runs along the part of Highway 1. And down there, it's known as PCH, or the Pacific Coast Highway. And it was just neat to see, like, okay, I'm actually going the right direction. Good to know. Even though, I had maps and GPS, it was kind of neat to see the Coast Highway signs. And because I've always seen them and I've always wanted, yeah, that would be fun to do one day. And so I cruised through Ventura, starting to become more of the Southern California beaches, the beautiful Ventura Pier, and decided to, and my destination was Oxnard. So I stopped at Oxnard Harbor, which is known as the gateway to the Channel Islands National Park. So if you ever would go to visit the Channel Islands National Park, this is where you would take off of. And a little fun fact that I never knew about this was Oxnard is actually known as Hollywood by the Sea. Back in the 1920s, a lot of films were filmed in Oxnard, and a lot of Hollywood stars lived in Oxnard. This was before Malibu became where the stars lived, or Beverly Hills. This is where you wanted to live, which I never knew that Oxnard was just a place we went to go fishing. So that was kind of neat. And so, and the neat thing was my parents were meeting me in Oxnard. And so I got there early, so I had plenty of time for lunch. And being the hungry hippo that I was on this trip, I decided to eat a whole medium pizza to myself and decided to sit and enjoy the scenery. And it was nice just to sit out, relax, after the long, hard day. It was nice to get off my bike for a while and just watch the boats go by and enjoy some pizza and just kind of just soak it all in and enjoy the moment of, I'm in Oxnard and I left Salinas. And so cruising through Oxnard, this is where, you start getting to these unique beach houses that remind me very much of like Newport Beach, Huntington, San Clemente. And so I cruised through the little streets, and when you pop out away from the coast, you pop up and I saw strawberries. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect Oxnard, which you think Oxnard's a beach city, to have all these strawberry fields. Well, come to find out that Oxnard is the strawberry capital of California. It's where most of our strawberries come from. And it was neat because they have a huge festival similar to kind of the Gilroy Garlic Festival, but they have a strawberry festival. So that was really neat to see. And also you could smell them. So it was actually a very sweet ride from there on out, just enjoying the smell of the strawberries. So once I got to Oxnard, my parents joined me. My mom joined me from here on out. So the ride from Oxnard to Santa Monica was another long day. The 50 miles, 1,300 feet of climbing took us about 4 hours and 15 minutes. This was nice because after so many days of riding by yourself, I really wanted some company, someone to talk to. So my mom, who's an avid bike lover like I am, decided to join me, and she's kind of just as crazy as I am. And so she thought, okay, I'm going to join you from Oxnard down until we get home. So we left Oxnard and we went by Point Mugu Naval Air Station Reserve, which is the Naval Air Station Reserve for southern part of California. And she did the trip with me. She's very friendly. It was nice to talk and just, tell the stories of what I've experienced. And she just loved the fact that she was carrying all her clothes on her bike, and we had no cars to even turn around on. And she was also getting used to riding with weight on her bike. The neat thing is Point Mugu has a museum outside that's called Missile Park Museum. And I love history. And so of course I told her, I was like, I need to take a picture with the planes. Like, these are cool airplanes. So she appeased me for a little bit as I looked around and read every sign on every plane and got to see the different planes. And she was laughing at me and how I kept telling her what time they served. And so that was really nice. Plus it was kind of nice to see, it was just something different. It was something I didn't expect. It wasn't on my plan. It was one of those random things you come across when you are riding your bike. And so we headed out after Point Mugu. We headed down Highway 1, and this was right along the coast. And the views were just breathtaking. We had to do a quick little stop in Point Mugu, the actual Point Mugu. This was where I got my first and my last flat tire. Out of the whole trip, I only got one flat tire. So, and if there was a place to get a flat tire, this was a place to get it because the scenery was just breathtaking. And it was a nice place for a snack break. And from there, we headed up down to Malibu, which was really neat. Growing up in Southern California, I've never been to Malibu, just never was a thing to do. So it was kind of neat. We stopped at Malibu State Beach and enjoyed some PB&Js and got some soda and just kind of soaked in the sun, soaked in the views, and it was neat because it was a new place for me to experience. But the roads were not very good through Malibu. And this was kind of a challenge. This is a view of Highway 1 through Malibu. So in Malibu, you have the big houses and you have the houses up against the road and all the state beaches that even though you can see there's a nice big bike lane here on the right, there's cars in the bike lane. So not only cars zipping past you quickly, you kept having to weave in and out of them. And that got old after the first 2 hours because it was just a little stressful. Some cars were really nice, some cars zipped right past you. And I think it happened to be trash day. So not only cars, but we had trash bins to avoid also, which was, fun for the adventure. So once we got down, we finally got to our destination of Santa Monica. And again, I've never been to Santa Monica, so I was really excited. Santa Monica has a rich history. Its pier is famous. It's a very old style pier. And so unfortunately though, Santa Monica Pier was closed because of COVID. It was still neat to see. And this is also where we had our second mishap with some technical bike stuff. We wear special shoes on a bike that keep your feet clipped into the pedals. Somehow my mom's shoes broke. The pedals came apart. And so luckily they have an REI there. We were able to grab the pieces and go back to the hotel and fix them. And everything was good as new. If not, she was going to have to ride the rest of the trip in flip flops, which would not have been comfortable. But so it was a little nerve wracking, a little stressful, but it all worked out. And I guess that's part of the adventure, dealing with the adversity. But it was neat that we were in a very nice, beautiful place to deal with this. Not on the side of Highway 101 or Highway 1. We we're at least in town. And so we decided we wanted to explore walk around the pier a little bit. And just so you guys can see, this is what the Santa Monica Pier looked like in 1909. And you can see it's beautiful. It's got the roller coaster, all the little fun houses. And so you can see that it really hasn't changed much. Still got a Ferris wheel, roller coaster, just it's not made out of wood. It's made out of other materials. And the Santa Monica Pier that you see now is actually, I believe, its third pier. It's been burnt down once. A storm destroyed most of it one year. So it's kind of neat to see the evolution of the pier. And also, one thing that's really nice about this area is it's the end of the historic Route 66, which was famous for not only going from Chicago, Illinois to Santa Monica, California, but it became really famous during the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression and during the Great Migration West, which definitely became famous. Also, John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. This is the road that they took coming to California. And so it was neat to actually see the end of Route 66. I grew up in Rancho Cucamonga. My parents' house is one street off Route 66. And I've seen the signs, Chicago to California, but to actually be at an end of a road, it's something unique, and especially such a famous road. So we enjoyed Santa Monica. We got some nice fish and chips, walked around. Santa Monica is a neat little area. There's a lot of beach shops. There's a lot of neat little local shops, a lot of just beautiful beaches. And so after we finished dinner, we decided to head on down to catch a beautiful California sunset. I call this my chasing the endless summer pose as I'm staring off into the sun. But it was neat to see just the mountains of Santa Monica and just the breeze, just the sunset was just magnificent. So our next day would take us into LA. And, I thought this day was going to be not too bad. The mileage wasn't bad, 35 miles, 1,300, almost 1,400 feet of climbing. That should be a nice day. And, the streets, the cars of LA, might have been an issue, but I'm used to that. I've ridden in San Francisco, and I was not ready for Mother Nature. Mother Nature decided to take a step into this. So we left Santa Monica, and ironically, the coffee shop right next to our hotel was called 10 Speed Coffee, which I believe it was just a sign from somewhere that a bike shop named after a coffee, or a coffee shop named after a bike was perfect. So we stopped there, grabbed some donuts, and we headed down. And it was neat. We got to ride through LA before LA woke up. We rode down Santa Monica Boulevard, and it was quiet. We could ride in the middle of the street. We got time to actually look around and not worry about cars and see the different architecture, the big houses along Santa Monica Boulevard, Beverly Hills. We did a little stint on the Sunset Boulevard, which is kind of famous for the rock and roll scene. And it's a famous street in LA. And but we started noticing the weather was starting to pick up pretty quickly. It was starting to get hot. It was about 85 degrees around 10 o'clock in the morning, which isn't too bad, but that was 10 o'clock in the morning, and we knew it was going to just keep going up. So we decided we wanted a little break from LA and the traffic and the cars and the heat. So we headed up to Griffith Park, which is famous in LA. It's one of the biggest urban parks in North America, but also it's famous for not only in a lot of movies, but it's famous for its observatory on top. So we headed into Griffith Park, and it was a nice little break for some food and sitting underneath the trees. And when you're in Griffith Park, you don't feel like you're in LA. You actually kind of forget you're in LA because there's big redwoods, there's big oak trees, hiking trails, and it's a nice little respite from the crazy streets of LA. And it was also another first for me. Well, After eating, we decided we had to stop at the original Tommy's, which is a famous for their hamburgers and their chili cheese dogs in LA. And it was founded in 1946, and it hasn't changed. As you can see, it still looks like the famous Tommy's in 1946. And there's the owner, Tommy Clocks, who started it in 46, and it is still running to this day. And it's neat because there's no seating. It's all kind of countertop standing eating, and it's a real grab and go kind of place. And the food is spectacular. Nothing better than a chili cheese dog on a hot day. And so I decided I'm going to take some chili cheese dogs with me for, just in case. Well, the temperature started to rise, and about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it was 115 degrees. Sounds terrible. It was pretty bad. The nice thing is my chili cheese dog stayed warm the entire day, never got cold. And so it was nice to have a warm chili cheese dog after some ice cream. You can see on my face the heat's really starting to get to me. Chili cheese dog and ice cream to the rescue kept me going until we got to Pasadena. But riding in such heat was something, because even when the breeze came through, it was like someone was just turning on a heater onto you. So that got old pretty quickly. But it was an experience, but it was hot enough that when we did hit our brakes, our brake handlebars were very hot, it wasn't enjoyable to hit the brakes either. So once I got some ice cream and some chili cheese dogs in me, got a little bit more energy, we took the final stretch of our day through the famous Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena, which is famous for the Rose Bowl Parade. This is the route that the Rose Bowl Parade goes through every January 1st. And the Rose Bowl Parade has been around since 1890 in Pasadena. It brought the tradition of the Rose Parade and the Rose Bowl football game to Pasadena, and it's been continuously going since 1890. And I found this picture, and I thought it was a great picture to show. This is the first place prize of the Rose Parade in 1895. And it's a horse-drawn carriage, and boy, have the floats changed dramatically from then to now. But it's kind of neat to see a horse-drawn carriage covered in roses. So we finally get to the hotel. We're wiped. We're sitting in the hotel. AC's blaring. And we thought, okay, it's time for dinner. It's 6 o'clock. It's still 107 degrees outside. So we decided, let's wait a little bit. Finally, about 8:30 at night, we decided to walk down to get some food. It's still 101 degrees. But, at this point, we were starving. We were like, all right, it's time to get some food. So we decided, after getting some food and some water, and we were getting ready for our last day from Pasadena to Rancho Cucamonga. And so we decided that we're not going to deal with the heat again. So we're going to leave before the sun even comes up. So we decided to leave from Pasadena to Rancho Cucamonga, and do our 36 miles. We left at 4:30 in the morning. Lo and behold, it was still 85 degrees at 4:30 in the morning. And, up here in Monterey, if it hits 70 degrees, it's like, that's beach weather. Let's go to the beach. It was 85 degrees, and the sun wasn't even up yet. But it had its benefits. We got to ride where there was no cars. And this was kind of one of those days where we didn't have to worry about routes. We've ridden from Pasadena to Rancho Cucamonga a couple times. So we knew the roads. We knew exactly where we were, how far we went, all the different cities. So it was kind of a little bit of a homecoming for me, since I haven't done this ride in such a long time. And so that was really nice. You can see here, my mom's got her little headlight on, keeping an eye, and it was neat just to ride through and not have to worry about cars, and just really soak in the final day, because it was a little bit of an emotional day for me. All this hard work and training and planning, and it coming to an end, and every day was so much fun. All I had to do was ride my bike. And so it was just one of those where it was bittersweet. I was happy to be home to accomplish something, but also I was sad that it was over. Well, it ended up being a great day. But the funny thing of this day was my mom kept forgetting that she had a headlight on her helmet. And so every time she kept talking to me, she kept shining her light in my eyes, which it got old about after the third time. It was one of those things that she kept forgetting, and it was fun. So we ended up just cruising through Monrovia through some really beautiful, nice bike paths. We went along the Santa Ana River Trail, and we ended up going through Glendora, which from there we knew, okay, we're getting closer to home. And, it's still, it's kind of almost 90 degrees and it's like 7 o'clock in the morning. So you could see the heat. And so ultimately we ended up getting home around 9:30 in the morning. And, my brother and dad were out there ringing bells and cheering us into our driveway. And it was a neat experience to not only do half of it by myself, to do something I've always wanted to do, but also to have my mom complete the last legs with me was something that was just truly special. So you can see here, this is what I did overall. And I overall ended up riding 291 miles and climbing 9,576 feet from Monterey to Rancho Cucamonga, from my front door to my parents' front door. After this, my mom and I, we got bit by the bug of bike packing, bike adventuring, bike touring. So we decided this June, we are doing the Old West Scenic Bikeway up in Eastern Oregon. And this trip's going to be a little different because we will be camping the entire way, getting our water from the rivers, making camping meals with our little stoves, breaking camp, setting up camp every day as we go through. And this is going to be neat because there's just a bunch of small little towns out there in Eastern Oregon that really remind you of kind of the pioneer cowboy days. So this is our next trip, and thank you all for listening to me. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Wow, Sean, that was such a fun presentation. It was fascinating to listen about all the places you've been to and learn a little bit more about the history behind each of them. I see that other attendees also enjoyed it. Everyone's saying what a beautiful trip it was. Thanks for sharing your adventure. That was fun. Yay, Oregon. That's from Dominic. Real quick, while people get a chance to write their questions in the chat, I actually have a question for you. So what was the most challenging aspect of your trip? You talked a little bit about some unexpected things that happened, like technical issues. You also talked a little bit about the heat, but what was the most difficult part?
The most difficult part would probably be the planning, the pandemic, throwing that into the loop also. I've wanted to do this for so many years, and I've kind of had a general plan, but then you threw in the pandemic into it. You were a little worried. That just threw a little loop into everything, but also the planning of seeing which streets were open. Google Maps can help you a lot with that, but they're not always up to date. So just going day by day planning was definitely probably the more challenging of the whole trip.
That's very true. We have a question from Jeff. He mentioned that it looked like you got quite a bit of sun, but that you didn't get too sunburnt. Was that a major concern of yours along the way?
Yes, it was. I get sunburned very easily, and I knew I was going to be in the sun all day for 7 days. So one thing I did is I bought little mini sunscreen, and I kept them accessible. I probably carried about 4 or 5 of them. And so pretty much every time I stopped for break, I put sunscreen on. And so even though I still got some very interesting cycling tan lines, I didn't get burned too bad, but yes, lots and lots of sunscreen, and try to just take my breaks in the shade.
That's some good advice. So with everything and all the knowledge you gained from this long distance cycling adventure, if you were to do it again, would there be something that you do differently? And if so, what would that be?
I think one thing I would do differently, and one thing I wish I had time to do, was take a lot of side adventures. There was a lot of places that I wanted to see that I could have made my days longer and did a side adventure, such as when I was in Lompoc, I would have loved to ridden to Solvang and see solving, or spend a little time riding through Santa Barbara and checking out some of the history spots. Um, I wish I could have extended it so I had more time to explore the cities, because when you get there, you're exhausted. You don't really want to ride your bike more. So I wish I had a little extra time to see other aspects of the city and get to know them a little bit better.
That's true. We have a question from Helma. How did you take your pictures?
So a lot of those pictures were done with a selfie stick, and which I could put my cell phone on. And then a lot of the videos were through using a GoPro. And so just kind of, I made sure I picked a nice safe spot to record, and I stuck my 3-foot selfie stick out there and tried to capture as much as I could. That was probably another challenging thing, is trying to take pictures of yourself.
Nice. So one more question from myself. What would you say is the biggest difference between riding solo versus with a companion?
It's a good question. Well, one of the big differences is having someone to talk to. The mental, just after 6 hours on a bike by yourself, you kind of run out of things to think about. You start, you can only daydream for so long. So that was really nice, because I was getting kind of to my ends wit of, you know, you can only think about so much. And it was nice then with having my mom there to just have a conversation of like, oh, did you see that tree? That tree was cool. Well, when you're by yourself, you're like, oh, that tree was cool. And there's just no one else to talk to. So that was something that was, the difference was just having that companionship and then just enjoying someone to share those great moments with.
Jeff mentioned in the comments, no audiobook, Sean?
No audiobooks. I cannot ride a bike and listen to an audiobook for the life of me. I get so, because I think I'm paying attention to my surroundings, watching cars, that I end up missing a piece of the book, and then I have to stop, rewind. And so most of it was either podcasts or just music, just something just to have in my ear. I think I listened to a couple podcasts that I've already listened to. So if I missed it, I could easily just pick it up right away.
Nice. We have a question from Marie. She said that you mentioned that you're a bike mechanic. If you work at a bike shop that sells them or know of other good outlets, can you recommend a bike helmet with the biggest possible sun visor? And any comments about pros and cons of such a helmet?
So I do work for an independent bike company based in Los Angeles. So I don't work for a bike shop. We specialize in police officer and security officer bikes. But for a bike helmet, those are tricky because those are personal preferences. They do sell adapters you can put on your helmet. That's kind of like a big rimmed hat that goes that attaches to your helmet. And so you can get definitely those fit on any helmet. But around here, you know, Valley Bikes is a great place, great resource. I've gone to them a couple times. Iron Horse Bike Shop in Monterey is one of my go-to stops. And then REI is another go-to. Those are my 3 bike shops. If I need something, I go to.
Thank you for that recommendation. I have another question for you. So every time you mentioned when like something went wrong, I just kept thinking like, how did you prepare for the unexpected? You know, like in those cases, I would have been lost, but like what was going through your mind? Like, how did you deal with those situations? What would you recommend to other people who might be planning a trip and might come across some of those same issues?
It's a great question. And so a little quick background. I've done a lot of backpacking before this. And so I was used to sometimes unexpected things. One of the things that I always keep in mind is you can prepare. There's always something that's going to be unexpected. And so my personality also is, if it happens, I prepare the best. If it happens, it happens. And I kind of just laugh and go, well, okay, how do we fix this problem? So instead of, you know, getting mad or frustrated, I just look at it as, well, we have a problem. We need to find a solution. How do we get to there? And I just basically took everything as everything was kind of like a reference question, not to go on the library side, but everything, you have a question, where do you find the answer? And the nice thing is, I have my cell phone to look up anything, but it's just basically taking it one step at a time. Like, when my bike broke, it was like, in the beginning, it was like, okay, where's the nearest bike shop? What if they're not open? Okay, I can just postpone my day and take the train a little farther, and just kind of just, and that's one thing I've learned, especially on this trip too, is you really just got to kind of roll with the punches that are thrown at you, because if you try to control them, it just makes them 10 times bigger. And so that's kind of how I got through some unexpected things that I didn't see. Is it just, well, they just happened. All right, let's figure out a solution.
Definitely. Chris said that she loves your attitude about dealing with the unexpected.
Everything this year has been unexpected. So sometimes you just got to go, well, okay, let's figure out a plan around it. So, and it worked with the bike trip too.
Very true. So we're nearing the end of our hour. Does anybody else have any other questions for Sean? Feel free to write them out in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and just ask them directly. And if nobody else has any other questions for Sean, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for joining us. Once again, thank you, Sean, for this wonderful presentation. I'll be sticking around at the end in case anyone has any questions about library-specific programs. I saw out there a few about a history walk, so I can talk a little bit more about that then. But otherwise, thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.